Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this additional Cabinet meeting of Horsham District Council on 6th of July 2026. Please note the location of the fire exits over there and out that way. Please make sure that your mobile phones and other devices are switched to silent, and also please note that an audio recording of the meeting is being made and will be published on the council's website. Item 1, apologies for absence. Councillors David Skip and Jonathan Taylor send their apologies for this evening. Item 2, declaration of members' interests. Does any member of the Cabinet present have an interest to declare relating to any item on the agenda? No, thank you very much. Item 3, announcements. Are there any Cabinet member announcements this evening? No, I have none other. Thank you very much. Chief Executive, any announcements? No, thank you very much. Item 4 is public statements, and no statements from members of the public have been received for this evening's meeting. So, item 5. Horsham District Local Plan 2023 to 2040, schedule of proposed main modifications on pages 3 to 184 of the agenda. Now, given the complex and highly technical nature of the local plan proposal under agenda item 5, members will recall that I have called for questions to be submitted in advance of this session. Accordingly, this evening, I propose to firstly allow Councillor Ruth Fletcher to introduce this report in the usual way. I will then invite questions from those members who have submitted them in advance of this session and allow for the responses to those questions before then moving on for the Cabinet to debate this item before putting it to the vote. Thank you. So with that, I invite Cabinet Ruth Fletcher, Cabinet Member for Planning and Infrastructure, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Leader. Before I start, I want to give a huge thank you to our officers for the enormous amount of skilled, detailed and stressful work they have done to bring us, sometimes against the odds, to this special Cabinet meeting, the next stage in delivering a new local plan for our communities in Horsham District. Achieving a new local plan, especially for a successful and attractive areas like ours, where people actually want to live, has become increasingly difficult because of the scale of the new housing that is being demanded by the government and the continued reduction in local authorities' power to shape development to local circumstances. In Horsham's case, this has been doubly difficult because we've also had to grapple with the unique situation of water neutrality, which effectively made it illegal under Habitats law for us to permit most new development, while we were simultaneously required under planning law to continue to deliver new housing. From the start, our priority as an administration has been to deliver a new local plan to bring the district back to plan-led development, so that we can deliver the homes our residents need while protecting communities from harmful speculative development, provide supporting infrastructure, and protect our environment and green spaces. This evening is another significant step towards delivering the new local plan. This Cabinet is meeting to recommend the main modifications that will need to be made to the local plan in order for it to be found sound. These are mainly to take account of the ending of water neutrality and the very substantial changes to national planning policy that have happened since we submitted the plan for examination in July 2024. So, the first stage of examination hearings under Inspector Bohr was held in April 26, where a number of issues, including the overall housing target for the district, were considered, along with other matters such as affordable housing need and employment. The inspector wrote to us in May setting out the housing requirement for the district. He also requires that we meet half the unmet needs for Crawley and provide some housing for the South Coast. He asked us to update our evidence base to identify how we will meet this additional housing requirement. He also highlighted the new NPPF expected to come into force this year. He asked us to review our policies to ensure that they will be consistent with it and to ensure that the policies will not become out of date at or shortly after the plan is adopted. A great deal of work has been undertaken by the planning policy officers, supported by specialist consultants. We now have a number of recommended main modifications to the plan, which are set out in the report before us. However, before I turn to the detail of that, I do just want to speak about the addendum in your packs. This concerns a minor error. RUSPA Inset Map 29, included in the main Cabinet report at Appendix 2, incorrectly shows site allocations RS1 at RUSPA Glebe. This site is proposed to be deallocated as set out in main modification MM240, following the outcome of the planning appeal on the site, and the reasons for that are given in page 104 of the agenda. Therefore, you now have an addendum published on the 1st of July, which is a corrected map, and it shows site allocation RS2, land northeast of East Street, which is now the only remaining site proposed for residential allocation in Rusper Village. Turning to the body of the report, I will highlight some key points. Firstly, regarding sites for new homes. The report sets out that a review of around 100 potential development sites was carried out. The review focused on whether issues identified in the earlier assessments during the plan-making process could now be addressed to bring development forward. A number of reports in the evidence base have been updated to consider the impact of increased housing targets, and these include the assessment of transport impacts, what infrastructure is needed to support development and where it is best delivered, the ability of the market to deliver housing across the plan period, and the financial viability of the plan. The environmental impacts of increased housing numbers have been considered through a revised flood risk assessment, sustainability appraisal, and habitats regulations assessment. So a huge amount of work. This has now led to the recommendation of around 20 additional sites for allocation. These allocations are set out in Appendix 1 of the report from page 115 onwards. The largest proposed allocation of these is land at Adversane for a new strategic allocation. This will deliver an additional secondary school site, which will help to resolve existing and predicted capacity problems close to where they arise. The location is near a station and, together with proposed upgrades to public transport, will enable greater public transport non-car access options. The site has a compact settlement design, which will reduce the overall amount of greenfield land needed to deliver a development of this scale. This is important given the concerns raised by the local community about the loss of countryside across the whole of our district in order to accommodate growth. Moving on to the issue of viability, main modification 155 on page 82 of the reports pack is the result of the Council's updated viability assessment. This shows that it is unfortunately no longer viable for smaller greenfield development to require 45% affordable housing. The proposed modification brings this down to 35%, which is a level where most development now becomes sustainable. However, it's important to note that although there's a lower percentage of affordable housing on those individual sites, it is offset by the overall increase in housing numbers in the plan. This means that the total number of affordable homes that will come forward in the plan period is maintained. There are other proposed modifications. These reflect changes to the context of the plan, such as the removal of water neutrality and feedback from the inspector on a number of development management policies. So having covered the substance of the plan, I'll move on now to the next steps. Subject to agreement tonight to publish the main modifications, they will be subject to comment between the 13th of July and the 24th of August. This will be open to the public. We recognise that this is a tight timescale, given we're in the summer period, but this is the only way in which it is possible to meet the inspector's very tight timescales. All the comments that we receive will be shared with the inspector, and they will go to him for his consideration. He will then hold further examination hearings in the autumn. We envisage they will cover the sites already in the plan and the new proposed modifications. At this point, the inspector may decide to make further changes. Currently, we expect to get the final report later this year, with adoption in early 2027. I'll now move on to the recommendations of tonight's report. I'm therefore asking Cabinet to agree the recommendations as set out in the report, with amendments as follows. I would like to amend recommendation 1 to include the correct site allocations and deallocations as reflected in the addendum issued after the publication of this report. As such, that recommendation will now read as follows. Cabinet approves the Horsham District Local Plan 2030 to 2040 schedule of proposed main modifications as contained in Appendix 1 and updated policies maps as set out in Appendix 2 of this report, replacing the published Inset Map 29 RUSPA with the Inset Map 29 RUSPA published as an addendum, together with the updated sustainability appraisal, habitats regulations assessment, and other updated evidence-based documents, all for a 6-week period of representation from Monday the 13th of July to Monday the 24th of August 2026. Recommendation 2 remains as in the papers. It allows for the correction of minor errors such as typos and feedback from the inspector. Recommendation 3 also remains. It allows for modifications recommended by the inspector to be made before the plan goes to full council for adoption. On reflection and following discussion with officers, I have decided to remove recommendation 4 from tonight's recommendations as it does not relate to the examination process and is not necessary. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much, Ruth. Now, as alluded to earlier, well, I should just say there was a policy and scrutiny meeting covering this item last week, which was in depth, very, very constructive and very helpful. But nevertheless, as expected, there were still some questions following that meeting, and that have been submitted in advance. So I'm going to go through those one at a time. Most of them will be fielded by Ruth, but a couple of them will go to other members of the Cabinet, including myself. So first, could I ask Councillor Mike Croker to ask his question? Thanks.
Thank you, Leader. It's a fairly simple one, I hope. Section 1.17 of tonight's Cabinet report states that of the 20,915 homes, 13,600 are already accounted for through the neighbourhood plan, allocations, permissions, or from windfall development. So if you subtract those two numbers, one from the other, you get left with around just over 7,000 dwellings. However, the table in 1.17 only totals 4,389, which begs the question, where are the remaining 2,926? I suspect part of the answer might be west of Ifield, which appears to be missing from that table. But I must say, having ploughed through the main modifications document, some of the mathematics in various places is, shall I say, challenging, but let's stick with a simple question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Croker, for your question on the housing supply that makes up the 20,915 homes we consider can be delivered in the plan period. It is, I hope, despite the huge amount of information and the fact that things are changing all the time, a relatively straightforward question to answer. Fingers crossed. So, firstly, the table at 1.17 only includes the additional sites which have been put forward as main modifications. That means there are also sites which were already allocated in the submission site plan, strategic sites such as you mentioned, West of Ifield, and smaller sites. And these also contribute to that figure of 20,915. Plus, there are permissions for speculative and windfall sites that have come along in the intervening period. This means that we are now in a situation where we have existing commitments, completions and windfalls, 12,058. The submission allocation, 5,018. Additional proposed allocations, 3,831, coming to a total of 20,915. There is some further detail which you may or may not wish to hear in terms of the presentation of the sites in the trajectory, because this also varies slightly from the list of allocations in the Cabinet paper. The allocation land at Northland Storrington, 50 homes, is in the trajectory as an existing site because it comes under an existing allocation, STO1, and therefore is counted under the submission allocation total. Similarly, the 500 additional units at North Horsham are counted as a commitment rolled up in the North Horsham allocation, as it doesn't form a standalone allocation. So, in brief, to reassure you, I hope, the numbers do add up, albeit that with appeals and ongoing permissions and so on, things have been changing sometimes on a daily basis, but it all does add up to that 20,915. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ruth. The next question was from Councillor Josh Potts, who was unable to attend this evening now. So can I ask one of the colleagues in committee services to ask the question on his behalf?
So it's a question from Councillor Josh Potts. The Council's own settlement sustainability assessment identifies Henfield as a sustainable settlement with good local services, but also states that its public transport choice is limited, relying principally on an hourly bus service Monday to Saturday with reduced Sunday service, and that any additional housing would require services, facilities and infrastructure to be enhanced. By contrast, the same evidence distinguishes settlements such as Billinghurst and Pulborough as having rail access and Horsham as having a high level and a multiple choice of sustainable transport, including 2 railway stations. The transport assessment models approximately 690 homes at Henfield, significantly above the 270 homes allocated through the main Henfield neighbourhood plan. Given that the National Planning Policy Framework seeks to focus significant development where there is a genuine choice of transport modes and recognises that opportunities for sustainable transport vary between urban and rural areas, can the Council identify where within the settlement sustainability assessment, sustainability appraisal or transport assessment, the Council has undertaken a comparative assessment of Henfield's strategic accessibility against other Tier 2 settlements when determining the scale of housing growth? In particular, 1, What evidence explains why Henfield, a non-rail served rural settlement some distance from the strategic rail network, is considered capable of accommodating approximately 690 to 700 additional homes when the council's own evidence recognises its limited public transport choice and the need for enhanced infrastructure? 2. How has the council distinguished Henfield from Billinghurst and Pulborough, which have railway stations, Horsham, which has 2 railway stations and multiple transport choices, and Southwater, which lacks a station but benefits from close proximity to Horsham and its rail network, and Storrington and Stenning, where the council's own evidence identifies transport and environmental constraints? The last point here is if no explicit weighting or comparative assessment has been applied to rail access, proximity to rail, bus frequency, realistic commuting choices, car dependency, and deliverable transport mitigation, how can the council demonstrate that this distribution of growth is justified, effective and consistent with national policy, rather than simply treating all tier settlements as broadly interchangeable? This question does not dispute that Henfield is a sustainable settlement capable of accommodating growth. Rather, it seeks to understand the evidential basis for allocating such a significant level of additional housing to a settlement with materially different strategic transport characteristics from many other settlements within the district. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Liz. That was quite a task, so thank you. Ruth, could I hand over to you to field that one, please?
My thanks to Councillor Potts for his question. So firstly, I would say that we are facing a situation of high additional housing targets due to the change in the planning landscape. And this is something which is affecting settlements across the whole district. And I acknowledge it certainly affects Henfield as one of those settlements. This is an inevitable consequence of the high housing targets which we are being set. The site assessment process draws on a number of factors, and it's agreed that access to rail service is one of those factors and is important. There are other factors as well, and they're weighed up according to each site. In the case of Henfield, the assessment report and sustainability appraisal identifies that Henfield benefits from the regular bus service to Brighton operating 7 days a week and hourly bus service number 100 connecting it to a number of other settlements including Burgess Hill. Henfield is relatively close to the south coast towns and Brighton, and this was a factor that was recognised as significant in the sustainability appraisal and also very much by the local plan inspector, who specifically has asked the council to provide housing numbers to meet unmet needs from the south coast. As a second tier settlement, Henfield has a good range of services, shops and facilities for meeting the population's day-to-day needs. And unlike some other similar-sized settlements, it's less constrained by proximity to the South Downs National Park or flood risk. As you can see, this is an individual assessment of Henfield, and similar assessments have been carried out for other settlements. Tier 2 settlements have not been treated as broadly interchangeable. The assessment has looked at their very different characteristics and constraints, their relationship with the landscape, and the availability of potentially suitable sites. As a result, some Tier 2 settlements will be accommodating a greater level of growth than Henfield. For example, Billingshurst and Southwater both have very large strategic scale development proposed. And just as a point of completion, Horsham, the Tier 1 settlement, also has a very large strategic site and other sites proposed. I think that's the end
Yep.
of my response. Sorry,
Yes.
I sort of stopped mid-flow there, didn't
All
I?
right, thanks very much, Ruth. Could I next ask for Councillor Paul Clark, please?
Thank you, Leader. After our session on Wednesday over in scrutiny, I did question policy 3 when I have further questions. The question relates to policies 3 and now 14 of the proposed plan. The new policy 14 is in fact related to policy 26 of the HDPF, which is out of the BOAB development, which is a policy saying it should be central to countryside location. The modified HDLP that we have removes some key aspects of countryside protection policies. As I said, I raised the issue over in scrutiny on a point of policy 3, but missed policy 14, and I was put right by a member of the public. Basically, the director of place said at the over in scrutiny that if we got something wrong in this plan, we could correct it with the next plan that's coming along on the heels of this one. I thought that was quite an interesting comment. It was in relationship to site allocations, but bear with me. We're being judged against the NPPF of September and not against the NPPF of December 2025, which is as yet not crystallized, not firmed up. However, the mods to both policies appear to be taking into account the NPPF of December 2025, according it great weight, to use the planning terminology. But it's not been decided and yet may change in some aspects. Now, we all want to avoid sprawl and to use more greenfield sites than is strictly necessary. So the changes to these policies reduces these safeguards significantly. And we are now looking at things like coalescence of settlements, etc. Our officers' comments on the proposed NPPF 2025 criticised it in great length and criticised the wording which is tied to these said policies. So why are we caving in? It's a rhetorical question. The point being is if we change some of these policies radically and then fight to address a hypothetical NPPF December 2025 and find that it hasn't materialized in the way that we think it might, we are giving away protections that we don't necessarily have to. So the question is, why can policy 3 not retain, quote, adjoining existing settlement boundaries, unquote? As I said, the NPPF of 2025 talks about well-related, quote, to existing settlements, unquote. I think I've got that right. So why can't we retain in the new policy this link to existing settlement boundaries is the first part of the question. And also, why can't we retain in policy 14 the need to justify or be associated to the countryside use, which the proposed wording has removed. So therefore taking away key protections that we have in place, which we might not need to give away. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much, Councillor Clark. Ruth.
Thank you very much, I think, for your question, Councillor Clark, which, as you know, has been the subject of some external discussion, and I think you've already had some response to it already. Right. It's, what your question that you've introduced has sort of extended slightly from the comments that have been seen in advance, but I will try to answer you as appropriate. So, whilst the council does not agree with all the content of the emerging NPPF, and indeed we did comment very strongly against some of these aspects in our response to the government consultation, we must also be realistic about the direction of travel, and everything we know suggests that the draft NPPF will come into force exactly or almost exactly as the draft sits at the moment. We do not wish to be in a position where we adopt a plan where its policies are immediately disregarded. We have seen the impact of being under the tilted balance with increasingly out-of-date policies, and our priority must be to get back to plan-led development. The proposed main modifications are what, following Mr. Bore's written guidance and his approach in the spring hearings, we believe are necessary for the inspector to find our plan sound in the current planning landscape. This is a complicated issue because we are being examined under September 23, but we are looking forward to a new NPPF, which is actually quite radically changed from the previous editions, and particularly in the way it deals with development management policies and the weight that can be applied to policies in a plan when they conflict with the latest NPPF. So although we are being examined under September 23, when we get to development management for the new plan, the decisions will actually be taking under development management policies in that draft plan, which we have every reason to believe will be going ahead and which Inspector Bore has made his feelings plain on. So in an example, if you like, of this, I draw your attention to Annex 2 of the draft NPPF, which states that development plan policies which are in any way inconsistent with the national decision-making policies in this framework should be given very limited weight, except where they've been examined and adopted against this framework. In our letter to Mr. Bore in February this year, we set out that a review of existing submitted policies would be needed in the light of the emerging NPPF in order to make necessary updates and modifications. The initial review of those policies focused on the development management policies. Things have now moved on and officers have reviewed the other policies as well, including those for growth and change in the district in the same context. And those are the policies that you are asking about in your question. Policy S5 of the emerging NPPF, criterion 1, does allow for development outside built-up area boundaries where they're contained in allocation. However, criterion J of the emerging NPPF, states development that would address, and sorry, this is a slightly long quotation, development which would address an development which would address an evidenced unmet need, including but not limited to development proposals, including the provision of housing where the local planning authority cannot demonstrate a 5-year supply of deliverable housing sites or scores below 75% in the most recent HDT, and where the development would be well related to an existing settlement, unless the nature of the development would make this inappropriate, and be of a scale which can be accommodated taking into account the existing or proposed availability of infrastructure. So that is really the context in which I'm answering this. I appreciate it's a bit complex, and I can only agree with you that it is deeply disappointing that the national direction of policy is to successively remove local control from local communities. However, as I hope I've tried to explain, it is the first priority is that we must get this local plan passed. And what we are doing here is responding to that wording in the emerging NPPF, to the inspector's written advice that we've received up to now, and to his approach that he took, very clear approach he took in the hearings we've heard. So as things stand, we will be I would recommend the Cabinet to accept the recommendation as it stands. I would, however, state to you and to members of the public who feel likewise that this will be going out to consultation, and you are free, and I would encourage you to make your comments known in the response to the consultation, because if the inspector considers that they have got validity, it is within his gift to make a modification to take account of them.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ruth. And I would just say that from my experience of the examination so far, Mr. Bohr does read representations, does take them seriously. He is interested in them, especially when they're well argued and substantiated. So whilst no guarantees obviously can be made of how he will respond to those, I do think it is well worth putting them in. Thank you. Next, could I move to Councillor John Trollope, please? I believe there's two parts to your question, so if you go with the first one first, that'd be great.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, ever since last week's parish council meeting and also scrutiny meeting, there's been a lot of questions in Billingshurst about the choice of adversary. So I've got my question, I'm going to read it out. As you know, the proposition for West of Billingshurst includes a legal agreement signed with the Billingshurst Parish Council, which offers substantial investment in Jubilee Fields, a nature reserve, a primary school, and a community hub with plans for up to 1,000 new homes. Can the Cabinet Member for Planning and Infrastructure explain why the proposal for Adversane, which does not offer a nature reserve or the same investment at Jubilee Fields, is the better outcome for Billingshurst?
Thank you. Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you, Councillor Trollope, for your question. As in my previous response regarding Henfield, Billingshurst is undoubtedly one of those settlements which is going to be seeing very significant change and which will be very much a focus of our attention as an administration to ensure that that's delivered as well as it possibly can, and that the supporting infrastructure and so on and detail of planning applications is looked at to get the best possible outcome that we can. However, to move on to the substance of your question, in order to determine the most appropriate sites to contribute to those increased housing targets the plan inspector has set us, we carried out a site assessment document, as I previously mentioned. We assessed around 100 sites for this, and the full details are in the report. But the key points, I think, which are most relevant to your question about West of Billingshurst are, firstly, the Council's revised housing target is at least 20,100 homes, and that's a very significant number. The West of Billingshurst site would only deliver up to 1,100 homes, around 400 to 500 fewer homes over the plan period than the Adversane site, and it would require additional allocations elsewhere. Secondly, the revised site assessment analysis also raised concerns, which I think you're well aware of, over the West site, relating to the fact that it has a very dispersed form, and it's separated from Billingshurst by the A29 bypass, limiting the ability of the new development to form a cohesive new community. Because it's on the far side of the bypass, it also creates a risk of further sprawl westwards. Thirdly, West Sussex County Council have confirmed that the increase in homes would require an additional secondary school over and above those already contained in the submitted local plan. As we know, the Weald Secondary School is under stress for these places, and a secondary school has never formed part of the promotion of the West of Billingshurst site. This means that if we allocated that, it would add to the capacity problems rather than solving them. The land at Adversane proposes to provide land for a secondary school, delivering additional school places close to where they're already needed. It's not disputed that the proposals west of Billingshurst would provide some additional recreational facilities. However, having these would not be sufficient to resolve some of the other infrastructure issues which have already been identified. And as an additional point, I would comment that some of those proposals from west of Billingshurst, which some people are obviously, for obvious reasons, attracted to, are not things that we can require of the development as part of the plan process. They're effectively a form of betterment and therefore become much harder to ensure that we can secure them if that's what we were to have decided. So that's the summary of the reasons why we are not looking at putting in west of Billingshurst, and we have decided in favour to recommend in favour of Adversane instead.
Thanks very much, Ruth. I believe, Councillor Trollope, you have a second question to do with sustainable transport, I think.
Yes, thank you, Leader. This is with my active travel hat on. Can the cabinet member for planning and infrastructure also detail the steps that she and the council are going to take to ensure that we have a safe cycle route from Adversane to both Billingshurst and to Polborough, noting that the A29 and the B1233 are not safe for children to cycle on, and actually not that safe for adults either.
Thank you
Thanks,
again,
Councillor.
Councillor Trollope. Oh, sorry. As you know, active travel is also an issue that's close to my heart. It's an issue that causes challenge for a large number of our sites, including other strategic sites. It's not unique to the Adversane site. The proposed allocation policy for Adversane does, however, contain a clause that will require the developer to develop a walking and cycling strategy that demonstrates how attractive, direct and legible routes that have priority over existing traffic will be delivered and integrated with the existing and wider network. Given this requirement, this issue will be a key consideration as part of any eventual planning application, and I'd welcome the local members' engagement at that stage when we get there. The council will also continue to work with West Sussex County Council with our own resource, including our newly recruited active travel officer and local communities, many of whom are developing and who we are encouraging to develop their own active travel plans to ensure delivery of such routes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ruth. If I can now move on to Councillor Len Ellis-Brown, and again, if I could take the questions one at a time, because actually, although Ruth's going to start off, I think a couple of them are going to be with other people. So,
thank you very much, Leader. Question one was on traffic. The traffic assessment makes no allowance for New Place Road and Rectory Lane. There's been no assessment of the impact of the increase in traffic on Pigeon Gate Bridge, Polborough, and this significant increase cannot be mitigated by actions at the junction of Church Hill and Lower Street with the A29. In addition, the traffic assessment does not appear to capture the increase of traffic which will occur naturally using the government's minimum forecast traffic increase, which will be around 1.9% year on year. Therefore, without this development, traffic volumes will increase naturally by 30% during the life of the plan. So how can we be assured that this is acceptable, the mitigation that's been put forward, that this is an acceptable situation with their traffic assessment? I slightly modified, I've whizzed through the question. I can read it in full, but I didn't want to read it in full necessarily. I can read it out again in full if you'd like, Leader. Yes?
I mean, I think, Ruth, are you comfortable at that?
I have the wording of your question in front of me, so no, I think that was a good take. Thank you. So this is a detailed and complicated question. and I will try to give a what I hope is a useful summary answer to it. The updated transport study is intended to assess strategic impacts on the road network as a whole. It's not designed to pick up changes in movements on every smaller road throughout residential areas. That's not because that is to be ignored. That kind of detailed local modelling uses a different methodology that's not feasible or appropriate to consider on a whole district scale. So not all roads in the district have been, sorry, I've lost my thread here. So that kind of detailed modelling is not feasible or appropriate to consider on a whole district scale. Not all roads in the district have been or could be specifically modelled, but this does not affect the purpose or broad findings of the study. The main output from the modelling is to identify the impact on junctions, as this is where delays tend to occur, and from that to identify the key mitigations that are required. In respect of the points that you're making, the detailed traffic assessments that you're talking about will be undertaken as part of planning applications and inform the specific transport mitigations required to address impacts on local roads. Next, it's not correct to state that the transport assessment has not considered background growth. It has. It takes account of smaller sites such as Ranson's Station Road and Coppice Hanger, which fell below the size threshold for sites specifically included in the assessment, such as Greendean and New Place nurseries. What the traffic transport study does in looking at background growth is it's compared the actual traffic count data from 2025, post-COVID, compared with pre-COVID levels in 2019, and it observes that there has been no traffic growth over those 6 years, and in some cases there has been a fall in traffic levels during peak hours. There is obviously a genuine change that has been taking place since the plan was originally started in 2018 in terms of movement patterns for the country, which does seem to be partly due to COVID and working from home with the movement of technology for remote working. It's also important again to highlight that while the main purpose of the transport assessment was to consider district-wide strategic impacts, this is not the end of the story. Any planning application will need to consider impacts on a more local scale, and this may include issues such as Pigeon Gate Bridge in Pulborough. Regarding your comments about sustainability, it's clear from our proposed policy that it is an expectation that sustainable transport measures and public transport enhancements can be provided as part of the scheme. It's understood that the focus for promoters of that site has been the introduction of additional bus services linking the site to Billingshurst Station. Now, as I said at the beginning, that was a very detailed question, and I've spoken with the officers and they are happy to go over in more detail the specific locations that you've mentioned and to explain in more detail about the overall background changes that we are factoring into that. But I think I'm confident they have covered the points that you raised for that.
Thanks very much, Ruth. I think, Len, your second question is on promoter meetings, I believe. I think your second question is on promoter meetings.
Yes, just how many meetings has there been since January 2025 with each of the site promoters, in particular the one that about Barn and the one that had for sale?
Okay. So engagement with site promoters is an ongoing process and has been going on throughout the process of the plan. There have been many meetings and other forms of contact, and these have taken place at all levels and in various forms, not always face-to-face meetings. These meetings and this contact will continue. The contact has included the contact has included us getting information to respond to questions that were raised through scrutiny. The purpose of these meetings is not to be a numeric tally, but it's to ensure that officers have the necessary quality of information, which is used alongside the output from detailed discussion with key partners, including infrastructure providers, and the outputs from a range of evidence-based studies. So I don't have a specific figure that I'm able to give you. It has been, in some cases, when you get down to the limits of it, it would be difficult to define where it counted as a meeting or not.
Thank you.
And so I think that's probably plenty to hear from my voice droning on now for a while. And I'll let you ask your next question, which will be answered by my colleague.
Thanks very much, Ruth. Yes, Councillor Brown, you have a question around surgery and medical facilities.
People that don't want to hear me droning on. The surgical and medical facilities, will there be medical facilities within the proposed development? And if so, what stage will they be delivered? In our district, the ratio of GPs per 100,000 population is well below the national average. And we heard last night, this was the ONS meeting, that surgery in Billinghurst is at maximum capacity already.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis-Brown. I'm going to give Ruth a brief break here and let the Cabinet Member for Wellbeing, Tony Franklin, take this one.
Thank you, Leader. And firstly, thanks to Councillor Ellis-Brown for this question, because it is undoubtedly a question that will be at the front of minds of current residents and certainly future residents as well. As members will be aware, new development in itself, including that allocated in the local plan, can't explicitly address existing deficits in infrastructure provision. And in particular, in this example, perhaps the ratio of general practitioners to patients. However, the policy wording for land at Adversane makes it clear that the developer will be required to ensure that the healthcare needs arising from the development itself are met by providing land, buildings, and or making financial contributions. And indicative master plans from the development have indicated the provision of a health centre. Ultimately, however, the provision of health infrastructure is a matter for the NHS, with whom Horsham District Council have engaged throughout the process of plan preparation. To date, feedback has indicated that plans for expansion of the Billinghurst GP surgery could be one way the needs of the new residents are met. The proposed policy for Adversane makes clear that there should be liaison with the Integrated Care Board to ensure the healthcare needs of the community are delivered in a way that is supported by the National Health Service. The timing and delivery will be determined through further engagement with the NHS at the planning application stage.
Thanks, Tony. Councillor Ellis-Brown, I think your next one's on site design.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, as we don't have a supplementary design statement, will the Cabinet establish a small working group to oversee the design of the development? The aims would be to ensure we have a high quality development and what is proposed is delivered, especially when mitigating the harm to nature on a greenfield site that is close to 3 internationally recognised special areas conservation. Research by Sheffield University has identified that the developers are not always delivering on mitigating the harm to nature.
Thanks, Councillor Ellis-Brown. Not to terrify you too much, but you get me this time. Before addressing the specific point, it is worth noting that under the new planning system, local authorities can no longer prepare supplementary planning documents. So producing a supplementary design statement is not an option, sadly, available to the council. That said, there are several measures in place. There are already several measures in place To help ensure that the development is well designed and that key commitments are delivered. The proposed policy for the site requires a site-wide design code, a landscape-led approach to the layout of the development, and a comprehensive ecology and green infrastructure strategy. Together, these are intended to secure a high-quality scheme and protect the site's environmental assets. The Council is aware of the site's proximity to internationally important nature conservation sites. As part of preparing the local plan, the Council has undertaken the necessary habitat regulations assessment, and the proposed allocation includes the mitigation measures needed to demonstrate that there would be no adverse impact on these protected areas. In addition, planning permission can only be granted if the Council, as the competent authority, is satisfied that the development would not harm the integrity of those protected sites, either on its own or in combination with other developments. There are also existing opportunities for councillors to be involved in reviewing the quality of the development as proposals come forward. These include member engagement during the pre-application process and consideration of reserved matters applications by the Planning Committee for major developments. While these mechanisms are already available, the Council can consider whether any additional arrangements, including further member involvement, would be appropriate as the project progresses. I think I would just add to that, I think we all want the best for our people, and we're all committed to delivering that. And whilst we have to act always within the regulations and within all of the appropriate principles, hopefully members will know me well enough to know that I'm always open-minded about what the best way is to deliver the best for our people. So hopefully that means something. Thanks. Question 5, you have a question, your final one, Councillor Harris-Brown, on risk analysis and mitigation.
Paragraph 8.1 lacks detail on why the risk of a judicial review is considered low. Paragraph 8.2 also lacks details on what activities within the planning processes have been removed. If those activities add value, the outcome will be less efficient and effective, or both.
Thank you. Me again. I would always like to see that a lack of detail on an assessment of why a legal process is risky or not, because you don't want to show your cards to the other side. However, as with any decision-making process, there is a risk that it can be challenged. The point of this paragraph, the paragraph referred to, is to highlight that we are seeking to minimise the risk of a successful challenge. This is achieved by ensuring that the Council has a robust evidence base, and that in preparing the plan, the Council has followed the necessary legislative procedures governing local plan preparation. These processes are set out in other sections of the report, and it was not considered necessary to repeat them. The Council has not removed any processes that it is required to complete. Paragraph 8.2 simply highlights that there is a significant workload in the strategic planning team, which is being managed carefully to ensure necessary work is completed in the required timescales. I think I'd just add the note when it comes to following the appropriate legislative procedures, and you know, I take this stuff very seriously, and I'm very aware of the importance that's placed on this process and how important it is to all of our residents. And you may have noticed that from how carefully I'm approaching this evening's meeting. Thank you very much for your questions, Councillor Ellis-Brown. I hope we've done a decent job of answering them, and I hope they've provided some enlightenment, not just to you, but to others as well. If I could move on finally to Councillor Alex Jeffrey to ask his questions, and these are going to be fielded by Councillor Walters, but if you could do them one at a time, that would be great.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Just before I go on to my questions, I'd just like to place on record my thanks to the officers for all the hard work that they've done to get us to this point, considering where we were last year with potentially having to withdraw the plan and consider withdrawing the plan. So thank you for all the hard work to get us back to this point. It's really vital. I had a few questions in regard to the affordable housing requirements. So I'll start with my first question. The report that we've received states that reducing the affordable housing requirement from 45 to 35% is not expected to significantly reduce the overall number of affordable homes, because more homes are being allocated overall. Could officers or the cabinet member therefore quantify that statement by setting out the estimated number of affordable homes expected under the submitted local plan compared with the proposed main modifications, and explain how this remains consistent with the council's commitment to increasing the supply of genuinely affordable homes and social housing, particularly given the continued level of housing need?
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. My response includes numbers. I'm very sorry about that, because numbers don't come across very well when you're talking like this. So looking at the site allocated in the submitted local plan, there are about 6,900 homes expected to come forward. If all of these homes provided 45% affordable housing, this would result in approximately 3,100 affordable homes. The proposed main modifications introduce additional site allocations, increasing the total number of homes expected to come forward to about 10,700. Now, if we apply a 35% affordable housing requirement to the larger number, this would generate approximately 3,700 affordable homes, so an increase of 600. Now, the exact number of affordable homes that will ultimately be delivered cannot be known at this time or at this stage. Housing numbers can change as sites come forward, and viable assessments may sometimes support slightly higher or lower levels of affordable housing. However, based on current estimates, the modified plan is expected to deliver at least as many and potentially more affordable homes than the submitted plan. Whilst it's disappointing the evidence no longer supports the 45% requirement across all sites, the council must ensure that its policies are realistic and deliverable. The modified plan is still expected to provide a significant number of genuinely affordable homes over the planned period, which reflects the local need.
Councillor Jeffries, your second question.
Yes, thank you, Leader. My second question was in relation to the viability study. So having read the updated viability study, I note that it concludes 35% affordable housing is a reasonable threshold, but it also suggests that viability concerns begin to emerge at around 40%, rather than stating that 45% is undeliverable. So could it be explained how the council reached the policy judgment that 35% was the appropriate figure, rather than another point between 35 and 45%, and what evidence supports that conclusion?
Thank you for that question. The consultants who carried out the viability assessment tested a range of affordable housing requirements between 35 and 45%. Their work showed some sites could support a higher requirement of 35%. However, during the examination hearings in April 2026, the focus was on identifying a level that would be viable across a majority of developing sites and market conditions, so that the policy could be confidently delivered in practice. On that basis, 35% was considered the highest affordable housing requirement that most sites could realistically support while remaining viable. This approach is consistent with the recommendations of the council's viability consultants and helps ensure that the policy is both ambitious and deliverable.
Thanks very much, Councillor Walters, and Councillor Jeffrey, your final question.
Yes, thank you, Leader. My final question, given that developers can still submit site-specific viability assessments at the planning application stage, how confident are we that 35% will be the level of affordable housing actually delivered on most sites? what safeguards do we have in place to ensure this does not become the starting point for further reductions through viability negotiations? Thank you.
An interesting question, thank you. In my experience, and I've been around a while now, developers have always been able to submit site-specific viable assessments to show that full affordable housing requirement cannot be achieved on a particular site, and that unfortunately that position will continue, has done for many years, and I doubt very much that it will change going forward. However, the updated viability study gives officers confidence that a 35% affordable housing requirement should be achievable on the majority of the greenfield sites, and therefore represents a realistic target for delivery. In addition, the proposed main modification 157 strengthens the policy by making it clearer when a reduction in affordable housing may be justified. Under the modification, reduced provision would only be considered in genuinely exceptional circumstances, such as abnormal site costs that were not already accounted for in the evidence supporting the local plan. Now, again, I've been around a while, I've seen all of these different excuses that they've used, one after the other, and obviously site costs is right up there. So this means that 35% should remain the starting point for negotiations, with any departure from that level requiring clear and robust justification.
Thank you very much, Councillor Walters. Thank you very much to all members who submitted questions. I think they're all very helpful, both the questions themselves and hopefully the responses. If we can now move on to the debate amongst Cabinet members on the recommendations that are before us as amended, as they say on a highly rated television programme. Who would like to begin? Councillor Olsen.
Thanks. I felt like you were looking at me anyways. So we're here tonight. We know we have a duty to deliver a local plan and to get us back to plan-led development, and we've been committed to delivering a local plan for our district, and I'm relieved to see us at least advancing to the next stage, even albeit a stage we didn't necessarily predict we would have initially. When you read the report, you're reminded of the history, and we've heard that from Councillor Fletcher introducing it. You know that we've went to inspection as soon as we could, navigating the complexities of water neutrality, and of course its original submission. Since the original submission, there have been changes in government and policy, and I thank our officers for persevering and continuing to meet the needs that have been asked of them from many different competing parties. I want to remark briefly on the continued reference to Crawley's unmet housing need in the local plan, seeing that the government's plans for local government reorganisation continue to move forward. In almost every scenario for the outcome of that process, we will be a unitary with our neighbours in Crawley, and it will soon simply be our joint housing need in the future. I'm just pointing that out. Moving to affordable housing, I, along with others, will be disappointed by the results of the viability study, I think, showing that our aim to deliver 45% affordable housing was simply not possible, which we just covered in Councillor Jeffrey's questions and the answers. Of course, this lower percentage indicates in no way our commitment to delivering as many affordable units as possible has shifted. We are, of course, at the mercy of market forces, and as well as global events that have an impact on house building costs to the detriment of our current and future residents. But we simply cannot overpromise in this modified plan. And as the report notes, while the percentage has gone down, seeing the overall number of allocations has increased, the resulting number of affordable units is likely to be the same as we previously hoped, or actually a bit more. And we need more affordable housing, and having a local plan will deliver more than not having a local plan, of course. Regarding the additional allocations required by the inspector, you can see in paragraph 1.17 of the report and further down, additional allocations are spread right across the district, including Horsham town itself, and in policy MM234 land at Horsham, which includes an additional site at HOR3, the land south of Newhouse Farm. While I'm here as a cabinet member, I'm also, of course, a local Forest Ward councillor and a Horsham Town councillor. And I know that my residents still have concerns about some of the sites in the plan, particularly the Hornbrook Farm Development Policy HR1. The recently submitted application at Hornbrook Farm exceeds the lower limit written of at least 100 homes in the policy. With the application yet to be decided, any higher number can't be factored in at this time. My understanding is, however, that if the site is approved for more homes than currently listed, that additional number would feed into our housing trajectory and 5-year land supply calculations going forward. That said, I think this is another reminder that our policies are not simply about locations and numbers, but also good planning and place building and addressing the needs and safety concerns of future and current residents. And I want to see all applicants, be it large scale or small developments, continue to work with the policies in this plan, even before it's officially made. That also goes for the Hornbrook applicant, as there are some specific points that have been and are still listed in this plan that I hope will be addressed in the current application process. When applicants engage with us through our officers, through the processes, we can get the best results for our residents with every allocation and site, be it large, strategic, or small. So finally, speaking of engagement, the public will now get to comment on these modifications from the 13th of July 26 to 24th of August 26. As the cabinet member, Councillor Fletcher, and the paper state, these comments will go directly to the inspector. Whether you feel we're making the right proposals and decisions tonight, ultimately the inspector will review these modifications and your comments this autumn. It's finally worth reminding any members present and the public listening of the consultation currently underway regarding the scope of the next local plan, Horsham District 2045. The HDC communications teams have been working to ensure we signpost respondents to the correct consultations, because unfortunately the timing of both these consultations taking place over the summer and overlapping by 2 weeks was simply out of our hands. So again, I would just like to thank everyone who's been working to get us to this state, and I hope to see this plan move to the next stage shortly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Olsen. Councillor Walters.
Thank you. I just wanted to pick up on a couple of things, really. Going back to the housing need, one of the things that we've identified within the housing team is that we really need 3 and 4 bed homes which are affordable and social. And my concern is that the developers are always will always come up with the argument they can't afford it, this site's not viable, But we do need affordable homes which are socially affordable as well in the 3 to 4 bedroom category. That's going to be an interesting conversation with the developers, I think.
Thanks very much, Belinda. I think I saw how Councillor Blackburn here.
Thank you, Leader. And actually, I do want to thank you and Councillor Fletcher and all the officers who've worked flat out for such a long time to get us here. Councillor Fletcher has outlined the situation to the present day and intimated that we are looking to the future with the modifications to the emerging local plan outlined in this report. And Councillor's questions this evening have drawn out detail. But on a macro level, we must make sure that we do not miss any chances to make residents' lives better, particularly with respect to looking for, finding and seizing opportunity where communities across the district are set to grow. And I was glad to hear Councillor Fletcher reference this already this evening with specific regard to Billingshurst. Growth in the right place must be genuinely enhancing a better choice of homes, supporting good education provision, building a healthier lifestyle, boosting the local economy, and not least securing the natural environment for the future. Regarding the environment particularly, more frequent heat waves demonstrate perfectly why carbon emission reduction alone is not enough when making adjustments for climate change. We have to prepare for increased flooding and heat. This requires making adjustments to land management, including agricultural and land guardianship training, bolstering nature corridors, restoring rivers and reinstating floodplains, as well as other habitat and carbon sinks. Additionally, Horsham is particularly well placed to support West Sussex County Council and Sussex Nature Partnership
in the immense job of restoring nature across the county. The local nature recovery strategy required by the Environment Act of 2021 has recently been published, and through its own work as well as partnerships and collaborations, this council has already made significant contributions on behalf of residents. Colleagues, I'm content that making these particular choices, as outlined and discussed here, that Horsham can continue to thrive and prosper. The aim, and I know it is important to all of us, is that our district carries on being a great place to live, a place of dynamic resilience and rooted aspiration. Leader, I support the recommendations in this report.
Thank you very much, Councillor Blackburn. Councillor Bainham.
Thank you very much, Chair. First of all, I'd like to say that I welcome the progress that's been made on getting this local plan over the line. And I also welcome the positive attitude of the planning inspector in this regard, which is a pleasant contrast to that of his predecessor. And I want to make clear, we need to have more houses, more homes in the district. The numbers of adult children, some with families, many with families, who are now still living with their parents, is at an all-time historic high. And unless we get more affordable homes for these families and individuals to live in, that crisis is going to develop more. I recognise that the changes since the original draft plan was submitted, the changes that have happened have had a consequential impact. I mean, the changes in the NPPF, the changes in the removal of the requirement for water neutrality. And I recognise the necessity that the numbers have to go up quite considerably from what was there in the original draft. And we've heard from the Cabinet member that this necessitates the addition of a further strategic site, which by necessity has to come from those that were originally submitted when the call for sites was put out, however many years ago that was. And that leaves 4, because there are 4 that were not in the original plan. Kingsfold, west of Billingshurst, Buckbarn and Adversane. Well, if you look at Kingsfold, unfortunately, the developer is not in a position to proceed, so that one's ruled out straight away. If you look at west of Billingshurst, then we've heard from the Cabinet member the reasons why that has not been included. Essentially, it doesn't provide enough homes. It doesn't provide the education infrastructure in terms of a secondary school, and the patchwork nature of that proposed development mitigates against it. So that leaves 2. That leaves Buckbarn, or it leaves Adversane. Well, let's have a look at those 2. Buckbarn. And it's no secret to the leader and others that this is an area where I've been struggling. I'm concerned very much about the impact on our natural environment. I am an environmentalist at heart, and if you look at Buckbarn, it adjoins the largest Section 5041 habitat site in the district. You will have heard quite a lot over the last 2 or 3 years about the wild of Horsham, most notably from my colleague Colette over to my left. And part of that talks about wildlife corridors. Well, the imposition of a settlement on the scale of Buckbarn, in Buckbarn, actually changes the wildlife corridor to more of a wildlife cul-de-sac. And the impact on that particular area and the surrounding areas would be, to me, pretty unacceptable. So what about Adversane? Well, Adversane obviously will have an impact on the environment as well, but it is not as severe as that of Buckbarn. But I've lived in Billingshurst for 32 years. I represent the ward, and I've seen the cumulative effect of development, large-scale development, in the years that I've lived there. I think it's roughly 50% bigger than it used to be. With these developments, it'll be a lot bigger still. And the stage we are at the moment, without any further development, is that the pressure that has been put on the local infrastructure has put it almost in crisis. And I'm talking about the local infrastructure in terms of social infrastructure, economic infrastructure, transport infrastructure, health, and probably there's a list of other categories as well. And that's the status quo. Now, on top of that, we see the existing strategic site in Billingshurst, the East of Billingshurst site, has been expanded under the modification by a further 350 homes, which is a 50% addition. We've seen in the northeast of Billingshurst a series of speculative developments, which, largely because of the actions of the previous inspector in pausing the hearings, has allowed those developments to go through on the tilted balance, and now they're included in the plan. And my worry is there, well, what is going to change? I mean, we have some investment in Billingshurst with the Better Billingshurst project, but that no way has the scale to put right what needs to be done already in Billingshurst, let alone this very considerable increase. And unless there is a sort of a regeneration project, a large-scale one, that situation is not going to improve. So I find myself something between a rock and a hard place here. And it's for that reason that I find it difficult to give my unqualified support to this modification proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. Any more for any more? No, on to me then. I should add my thanks to those of others, to everybody who's worked so hard and contributed so much to this, to get the plan to this stage. I should probably do that a little bit more sincerely. Yes, it's been a Herculean effort. I think we were very pleased to get back to the position where we could continue to take this plan forward, but that also came with some severe challenges, both yes, for members, but much more significantly for officers. So thank you very much for all of their work on this. I was struck by one of the things that Councillor Bainham said earlier, actually, when it comes to housing allocations and providing more and the need. You see, it would be quite normal, commonplace to sort of be the leader putting a local plan forward to say, well, it's terrible what we're being forced to do, but that nasty, horrible government is making us do it. But that would be easy to do, but it's not really actually the responsible thing to do, because life isn't like that. Life isn't that simple. Sometimes there are things that you have to do, and while they have challenges about them, you know that they're actually the right thing to do deep down. Having a plan, a strategy for how we bring development forward in this district is the right thing to do. Now, as grown-ups, we learn that sometimes not everything about these things can be done the way we want to do them. You don't get your way with everything. You have to take the world as it is, not the way you would like it to be, whilst you try and make it more like the world you would like it to be. The housing target numbers are high, but and they're getting higher and they're getting more challenging, but that doesn't inherently just automatically make it the wrong thing to do. And yes, targets could be applied in other areas, and maybe we're getting higher than we should have, and maybe other places are getting higher than they should have. But to a certain degree, that's just kind of, on one scale of looking at things, that is just kind of shuffling the deck chairs around on the Titanic, really. We hear the number 35% quite a lot. We've heard it this evening, affordable housing. It's always been that number kicking around to me, 35% affordable housing. But I'll tell you what 35% also is. It's the number of males in this country between the ages of 20 and 34 who still live with their parents, and it's going up. The number of women between that age who live with their parents is 22%. So the average is somewhere in between. But that's not the future I want to see for my country or for my district. It's certainly not the future I want to see for my children. And, you know, when you come to that realization, you have to act, and you have to do something about it. And yes, you know, maybe we're asked to do more than other places. Maybe other places could be asked to do more. But, you know, sometimes you have to stand up and lead by example and say, well, this is what we've got to do. And I think, you know, providing housing is not a bad thing. It's not an evil thing. It's not something that should be treated as just why are we being made to do this? You know, this is a long-term plan, and it's going to be moved forward over a long term in the next one. We were always planning 17, 20 years ahead with these things. And you have to take the long view and look at the future of your district and go, it's very, very important that we should always have front of mind the people who live here now. Of course we do. They're the people we're answerable to. But let's look about that a little bit more closely. We're answerable to the children who are being born now. We're answerable to the children who are growing up at the moment. We're answerable to the people who are growing older and can't necessarily stay in the housing that they're in at the moment, but where is it there to move to? We're answerable to the older people and the families of those people who need care. Where are the facilities going to be that they're going to live in, where they're going to be cared for? Where are the people who are going to care for them going to live? Where are the people who are going to provide all the services that we need going to live? You know, we need to provide people think and plan for the people who are here now, people who are growing up here now, the people who are going to need care. And yes, for some of the people who don't live here now, but are going to move here. But you know what? Quite a lot of people here who grow up here go and live in other places as well. Quite a lot of the people who want to come and live here used to live here when they were younger. They went away and did other things, and now they want to come back. You know, we have to look at these things in the round, show some leadership, take the right decisions. So all of the extra allocations in this plan, in this modifications, are tough decisions, but they're not malign or evil decisions that people have been forced into against their will. It's the right thing to do to plan for the future. And I'm not going to apologise for it. I'm not going to sort of say, oh, it wasn't me, Gov. I'm prepared to take ownership of this plan. I stand behind these modifications and this plan. And the day we actually get it made, the day we return to plan-led development in this district, and the day we look forward with optimism and hope for what we can actually do going forward, is going to be a very good day. So with that, I would like to put the recommendations forward to Cabinet members as amended by the Cabinet member earlier. And could I see a show of hands in favour?
A point of order. I'm sorry about this to come leaping back in, but it appears my brain did not transmit to my mouth what it thought it was doing.
Go for it
So
then.
I've made a mistake in the date of the current local plan, emerging local plan, when I read out the amendment. So I think I better read out the proposed amendment to recommendation 1 again, just so it's correct. And anybody who hears me getting it wrong the second time, please shout. I hope I don't. So here goes. Cabinet approves the Horsham District Local Plan 2023 to 2040 schedule of proposed main modifications as contained in Appendix 1 and updated policies maps as set out in Appendix 2 of this report, replacing the published inset map 29 RUSPA with the inset map 29 RUSPA published as an addendum, together with the updated sustainability appraisal, habitats regulations assessment and other updated evidence-based documents for a 6-week period of representation from Monday the 13th of July 2026 to Monday the 24th of August 2026. The other recommendations are as I verbally confirmed at the beginning.
Thank you very much, Ruth. Could I therefore see a show of hands from those in favour of those recommendations? That's 6. All those against? Abstentions? 1. Thank you very much. That motion is carried. Quite a long agenda item, and I appreciate that there are slightly higher than usual number of members here. So we've only got one short item to take afterwards, but I'm still going to actually take a 5-minute break at this point, and we'll come back. We will come back in 5 minutes when all cabinet members are here. Thanks. Right, thank you much everyone for your forbearance there. Item 6, corporate peer challenge on pages 185 to 200 of the agenda, and as leader I'll introduce this one. As you all know, I invited a group of 7 local government association peers to undertake a corporate peer challenge at our council in February. We received and agreed the report in the late spring, and I approved the publication of the report on the 5th of June 2026. The Local Government Association requires us to publish the action plan from this report within 8 weeks of publication of the report. Officers have prepared the action plan in discussion with Cabinet, and the Policy and Scrutiny committees both discussed but made no specific changes to the action plan, or recommended no specific changes to the action plan at their June meetings. They have asked us to report progress to them as we move through, which I'm more than happy to do. But my recommendation on page 185 is that that Cabinet approves the action plan, which starts on page 189 of the pack. As I say, this has already been published and gone to the scrutiny committees, so I won't dwell too much more on the specifics of the plan at the moment, but we'll rather open it up to other members present to see if anyone has any questions or comments on it. Councillor Circus.
Thank you, Leader. As you know, I'm at a loss to know why we're having peer reviews when we ought to be thinking more seriously about the implications of local government reorganisation and the challenges, the massive challenges that's going to present. I take it, therefore, that this is the last peer review that we're going to be engaged with, surely with what soon to be about 18 months before we disappear as an authority. I'm assuming there won't be any more peer reviews, or will there, Leader?
Thank you very much, Councillor Circus. Well, we wait to see what our friends in the north have to say about local government reorganisation. I suspect, I'm hoping to hear about it sometime next week, but we shall wait and see. But be that as it may, on everything that we assume the direction of travel to be, obviously there is a limited period of time. I can't see any circumstance in which we would be having a full-blown corporate peer challenge. I mean, you're only supposed to have them once every 4 or 5 years, Chief Executive? 5 years. So yes, so there wouldn't be a full-blown corporate peer challenge. We had a comms one, we had a governance one. So, you know, never say never. They might offer something interesting and useful to and actually maybe it's just from my life of having been audited every year for the last 20 years in my day job, but I always think there's something that can be found that can be done better or improved upon, and it's incumbent on us to do so where we can do that. And as I think I said in scrutiny, I think, well, I want us to be going into local government reorganisation. I want us to stay, because I think we are, match fit and best in class, so that we're setting, you know, the bar for how things should be rather than trying to come up to it. But if it makes you feel any better, Councillor Circus, I've certainly got nothing planned. I'll take that as no more from the floor. Any questions or comments from Cabinet members on this one? No, in which case I'll ask for a show of hands in favour of the recommendations. Okay, return to form, that's unanimous, thank you very much. Item 7, forward plan. This item is for noting. Does any member of the Cabinet have anything to say on this item? No. Thank you. In which case I'll move to item 8, which is to consider matters of special urgency. There are no urgent matters to consider this evening. I therefore close the meeting, and thank you all very much for your attendance and contributions and patience. I wish you all a very good evening.